lags in a couple of seconds, and I hate starting with a cut off thing. So we'll go 5, 4, and welcome back to Sullivan's Backstage Pass. I'm here with Wayne. Wayne, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me on.
So, take us through how you started in the music, right? Because you have a lot of albums, you've been around and involved in so many musical pieces. Like, what prompted you to start in the music in the first place?
Well, actually, I started, believe it or not, when I was 3 years old. My mother was the top Dolly Parton lookalike entertainer in the world for about 15 years, and I actually got started on stage with her, when other kids that age were learning their alphabet, their colors, all that other, the real basic stuff. I was learning old Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner duets and, other country songs of that era. So, we're talking mid to late '70s. And when she would be performing, there would be, I think, about probably 20 to 30 minutes where I would come out and we would sing some duets together. And then she would go for a costume change or whatever she needed. And then I would sing other songs, like I say, from that time period. And when you have a little boy that's 3 and 4 years old, sometimes hobbling around in a leg cast, singing to a bunch of drunken hillbillies and rednecks, I mean, it produces a very vivid picture, you know? In fact, my signature song, that was guaranteed to take the house down every time was "Take This Job and Shove It" by Johnny Paycheck. So,
At 3 years old, you're saying, that's
3 and
great.
4 years old, yeah. Yeah, as a
Do
matter
you
of
remember
fact,
the?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say is, I in, a box in my closet, I still have my first stage costume from back then. Uh A lot of the rhinestones are missing now, and some of the fringe on the back is tangled up a little bit, but, it's still the old the red jacket with some of the rhinestones on it and the fringe, and then, red and black flare leg, trousers that I had back then, and part of that was to match, some of what my mom would wear at the time, so, I mean, it was pretty cool. So, I started off in country, at a very young age. Got introduced to rock and roll around the age of 5. First band that I remember consciously hearing and being introduced to was the band Chicago because, I had an aunt that was a real big fan of theirs. Got into Broadway and opera in high school, and, as a young man, I I sang just about every style of music that was out there. I kinda came late to, like, the hard rock and metal party, but, I've done everything from opera to jazz to blues to, I was in a salsa band for 2.5 years. So, I mean, about the only things I haven't really tried my hand at would be things like, hip hop, Zydeco, and rap, and the first 2 I named, I actually probably would be able to be talked into it. But I've sang most every other style that you can think of. So, and that's not to try to make
So,
myself sound big or anything. That's just how I've been exposed to music throughout my life. So,
and at what age did you start picking up instruments?
I actually started learning how to play piano. I had my first lessons with it back in like first grade, but I didn't have the attention span at that time. Picked it back up around fourth grade, didn't stick with it, and then as an adult, I came back into it when I started, really trying to work on, like, songwriting and things like that, and for the most part, I've been self-taught. One of the things that I can do is, if I hear a song, for example, that I'm trying to learn, um, I don't I don't really do sheet music unless it's something more formal, like classical music or what have you, or if I'm composing, but most of the time, I'm able to hear things by ear, and I learned that way. And it also helps when you have, when I'm trying to figure out something on my keyboard and I'm not only able to catch the notes and the rhythm and everything, but I also listen for the patches that are used, and then I try to find something that's close enough to it that it'll work. So, it's kinda like, listening to a car or a wife or anything like that, if you can listen and find the problems if you just listen long enough. So and I'm married,
And
so I'm
it's
allowed
cool
to
that
make
you
that
have the
joke.
ability to have right? And it's cool though that you have that intuition with music that you can hear that sort of level of complexity because that's a gift.
Yeah, not a lot of people have it, and even some of the ones who do have it, they don't utilize it as well as they could, which is kind of a pity because some of the best moments of inspiration, at least for myself, happen when something like that's going on. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm hoping others out there will be able to kind of identify in one way or another as well. So
100%. So when you're in your formative years and you started to get into like the opera and like the classical kinds of music, did that help when you transitioned into creating your own music?
in some ways it did because I learned, at school, they teach you most of the technical stuff, find your vocal range, learn what the basic music knowledge is, and that sort of thing. But one thing that they don't teach you, and I think that they should sooner than high school or college, is how to feel the music. Because there's a difference between hearing it and feeling it because anybody can listen to something on the radio and go, "Oh yeah, I like that song," or whatever. But if it evokes a certain emotion in you or it takes you back to a certain memory and it's like you hear it and instantly you're back wherever this song puts you. And as a performer, to me, some of the best performers are the ones that don't just try to sing whatever it is they're singing, but they try to get the audience to react and to have some of those feelings come out because that's the real hook for music. It's not just, a catchy riff or, really cool lyrics or some sort of cool party vibe or whatever. It's the emotion and it's the reaction that you get, and once you have that, once your audience is into that, they become very invested in whatever it is that you're singing. And they're going to want to learn more. They're going to want to see more from you. So, in my particular experience, that's the trick. That actually distinguishes a singer from a performer. And to me, performers have always been the stronger of the two. Because you can have the best voice in the world, but if you have the stage presence that would shame a potato, then, what good does it do you? Because you're getting up there and you're singing and everything, but you're sweating buckets. You're looking like meatloaf on stage, and you're looking like you're ready to mess yourself, and you want to be anywhere but in that area. And that's stage confidence and confidence in your own skills, and that's something a little different entirely. But if you can make your audience feel your music, then you know that you're headed in the right direction because that's what gets them to notice you. And that's also what gets them to stay with you. So if you have that, you're in the right area.
So speaking of that, right? So when you're on stage, what are some of the things you're looking for from the audience that lets you know that they're into what you have going on?
One of the earliest skills that I was taught by my mom was what I call stage psychology. When you're up on stage, number one, you read the room, you read the audience, and you take a look at what their reaction is. If you're singing something and it looks like people are paying attention, they're kind of leaning forward, or you see somebody dancing in the back or whatever, or maybe they're just moving in their chairs, because they're either scared to get up or they're waiting for somebody else or whatever. That's signs where they're starting to notice you. Now, if I'm playing somewhere and people are going up to getting drinks, they're going outside for a smoke, they're going to the bathroom, then it could be, either they're not into that music or what have you. But if they're taking extended stays, then you have to switch stuff up. The other part of it is that the whole reason that you are there is because there's an audience to listen to you. So I know a lot of performers have that invisible fourth wall that they teach in drama and music arts and things like that, where it's like this invisible barrier between the audience and the band or the singer. I don't believe in that. I will get up because sometimes I'll be, some of the songs I do, I'll be playing behind my keyboard or whatever. But when I get a chance to get from behind that, I like to get out into the audience. I like to mix it up with them, get them involved, make them feel like there's a personal part of them being there. And I like to try to make them feel part of the show whenever possible. And that is even more valuable than people feeling your music because even if they're not into it, if you get up and you start involving them in the show, that can pull them into the music. So if you're willing to break that invisible barrier, it shows number one, that you are approachable, that your audience can find you fun, inviting, and in some ways, they can even feel like that, like members of the family in a way. You kind of make the audience unofficial band members by proxy. Unless, of course, you have that one cousin in the audience that you try to avoid at the family reunion, and then maybe you don't want to use them so much. But for the most part, get your audience involved. And whatever you're doing, don't ever let them see you sweating. If there's a part in the music where you fumble or somebody else in the group fumbles, it's like a tango. You just keep tangoing on, unless you just absolutely tank it so bad that you got to cut the song short and reboot. That hasn't happened too often with me, but it has happened once in a blue moon. So I usually turn around and look at my guitar player and say, "What the hell did you do that for?" So that way they look at him rather than at me. But if it's something I honestly mess up, I have to take the hit for that, and we'll just try to make it part of the stage show so that we don't lose the audience. Very rarely a dull
I
moment
like
in this
that.
business. So
And it's one of those things where the show must go on, right? And it's just
exactly
very important for that
that
piece. And
that
most of
is
the time, as
that's
yeah,
showbiz
sorry, and
rule
most of
number
the
one.
time the audience doesn't even some of the time the audience doesn't even know that there was an
Oh,
error.
right. If you do it well enough, you can actually pass the error off. And I've had a couple of times where somebody has come up to me in between sets and they're like, "That's a unique way that you played that song." I'm like, "Oh, yeah? What'd you think about it?" "Well, it's cool because you kinda took it and did a little different interpretation. You made it your own." And I'm like, "If that's what you think, we'll go with that." Yeah. So, but yeah, a lot of people, most of the time, they're not paying attention unless they are another musician, and even then, half the time, they'll be like, "You did that really cool." "Well, yeah, well, we kinda messed up there." "Really? I didn't notice that." So, if you can pass it off, it's kinda like being in church or being in school and passing off that fart that you're hoping nobody else catches. But if he can slip it in and nobody else notices, hey, extra points. But I apologize if the mention of flatulence is considered a little crude for your audience. I don't want to offend
Oh, we
anybody
swear
except
here.
those who are easily offended, so
We even swear here. It's all good.
okay. Okay, that's cool.
So the one controversial question, and it's only controversial depending on which part of the band you're in.
Okay.
Who's in charge of keeping the rhythm during a live performance?
My estimation, it is usually the responsibility of the rhythm section, which would be in my case, my drummer and bassist. However, they both tend to defer to the guitarist, because some songs, my guitarist likes to start off a little slower and try to build it up. And it's fine and good on some songs, but there are a couple of them where, heaven bless him, I look at him and I say, "Do you need me to build you a little bit of a ramp?" And he'll look at me and he'll be like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Well, We got to get you up to speed. You know, this is not a Diesel song. This is one of those songs you got to punch it and go. And every time I've ever mentioned a ramp, he looks at me and he goes, "You shut up over there." So, I mean, it's, but that's the good thing about it is that when you have good bandmates and you have a good band chemistry, you can make jokes like that. You can point at each other and say, you know, "Hey, I caught that," and instead of taking it personal, which some people have, you know, they'll just throw something back at you. And we'll make it part of that onstage banter that we have. And it's worked incredibly well for us. But short answer in my case, rhythm section. If you were to ask them, probably the guitar player. But it just depends. My drummer likes to make the joke, the song is played at whatever speed I play it at. And my guitarist, he'll sit there and go, no, and he's a Jewish boy from New York. So he's like, no, sometimes you gotta slow that down. And my drum will be like, okay, and then he'll start playing at double speed. And by the end of rehearsal, usually everything is worked out. The guitarist's fingers are calmed down to the point where, you know, he feels like he's playing halfway normally. And, you know, there've only been a couple of jokes that have been made at somebody else's expense. So I mean, we're good. And we especially love it when
And
we're go ahead.
do you find that ability to get together and get along as a band helps improve the music?
Oh, that's essential. That having a good relationship through the band. You have to have that because if you don't have that kind of camaraderie, if you don't have that level of trust with each other, you're never going to get anything done and everything is going to come out sounding like crap. Because even some of the bigger groups that have made it, one example that I can cite is The Doors. When they did that song, what is it? Touch Me, I think it's called. Come on, now touch me, babe. There was a point where where they went into the studio when they were doing that song, and it was to a point where they wouldn't even speak to each other that day. And that was actually noted
Oh.
in the movie that Val Kilmer was in when he did Jim Morrison in The Doors. And I understand that that particular recording session when they were putting that album together was actually taken from what happened in real life because by this time, you know, Morrison was really getting into the drugs and that, you know, the Lizard King persona, and Robbie Krieger and Ray Manzarek, you know, weren't feeling like they were being able to be as expressive and do more with the music like what they wanted to do. So it was to the point where nobody was talking, and they just went in and they did their stuff, didn't talk more than necessary. But then when they went to master everything to put it onto the album, you know, then people started kinda understanding, you know, "Hey, even though we were pissed at each other, you know, we still can make some pretty good stuff." And by this time, Jim had started to realize part of what he was doing was messing things up. Unfortunately, you know, had he come to that realization a little sooner, maybe he'd have been around longer and there would have been even better music that came out. But the fact is, they were able because they had worked together so closely and they had that particular intangible quality. They were able to make this music that came out pretty good. Any band that is like that, you even on your crappiest days, you can make the music sound decent. But if you are angry with each other all the time, if you don't trust each other, if you don't have each other's backs when it comes to it, you might as well keep training wheels on because they're going to fall off at any given second. And I think that's true in any aspect of like not just music. Doesn't matter what job you have. If you don't have a certain level of trust that people are going to do what they're going to do so that you all can work together toward the common goal, then it's not going to work, which may help explain why we've had problems in politics the last 100 or so years. So, but that's just me.
100%. So one of the things that I ask musicians on every podcast is about the muse, because I do believe that the muse is a living, breathing thing. So
Mhm.
when the muse visits you and you get an idea for a song, how do you capture that?
Well, it depends on if I'm merely covering the song or if it's something that I'm writing. When I'm covering a song, I will listen to it, but my thing is, so many people try to capture the original artist who does whatever song it is. And in order for me to have a connection with the song, it's gotta hit a certain plethora of notes for me. And I'm not talking about, A minor, B diminished, whatever. I'm talking it's gotta hit something's inside of me. And when that happens, if I'm listening to something, usually for the first time, if there is a particular groove that it hits, or there is a sound that presses that reward button in my brain, then I start getting interested in it. And you can tell if I'm interested because I'll start to move, I'll kind of start feeling things. I might start humming to it, that kind of stuff. Now, if it's songwriting, that it works the same way, but in a slightly different manner. The best way I can describe it is if, for example, I am working with someone and they have come up with music and they're like, "Hey, Wayne, I want you to listen to this and see if you can lyricize it." Because I've been in other bands before where that has happened. And I will listen to the music and I'll try to kind of get an idea of what they're going for, especially if they've given me like a particular subject they want the song to resonate. So I'll start listening. And if something happens, then it'll be kind of like a pinball machine going off in my brain. Something will hit and a certain part of the music will resonate. And then almost unbidden, it's kind of like a ticker tape starting in my head of, okay, here's what I'm feeling. This is kind of what's presenting itself to me. And I'll sit there and I'll write it down or I'll tap it into my phone or what have you. And if it's something that really resonates, I can write lyrics within a span of 10 to 15 minutes. So it actually happens rather quickly if it's something that grabs me right away. Now, there have been times where I've had a good idea musically, but the inspiration comes more in spurts. I've had songs that have laid dormant for literally decades until something else happens. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, this is kind of, I think I can go back to this and put it in there. That's the weird thing about muses is that they have their own timetables and they don't always coincide with ours. So I don't know if anybody else relates to that, but that's how it generally works for me. And I only speak for myself in this. So when the muse does decide to clock in, sometimes it can go very quickly. Sometimes sometimes the words will form before the music if I'm writing something, and sometimes the music will form before the words. Very rare occasions where it all comes out at once, and then I feel accomplished once I've actually gotten everything kind of locked down. My only problem is I wish I had the equipment or the finances ready to go and record a lot of this stuff before it before it fades. But I have probably 85% of my notes, if not recorded up in here, they're written down somewhere. So at the time when I can go and do things, I'll have it ready. And I've had the times where I have been able to record something, I've actually had a lot of people telling me this is good. Whatever it is that you however it is that you've done this, you need to keep doing it. And that to me is the ultimate validation because I can say whatever I want. And I could totally be pulling stuff out of my ass, and people would be like, "Really?" Or they'll look at me and like, "Dude, get out of here! You're full of it." But then when they hear it and they make their own opinion of it, and then they inform me of that opinion, then that tells me if I'm headed in the right direction or not. And 99 out of 100 times, usually I am. So I must be doing something right.
And when you put your last album together, did you like assemble it as like a one-time recording with all of the pieces in place, or did you do separate tracks and then sort of edit it together?
We definitely did it separate tracks because the band that I was in at the time, it was an original band called the River's Edge, and you can still find a few things of theirs out there on YouTube and other platforms. But the way that it would normally work is my guitarist would come up with an idea for music, and then he would kick it over to me to come up with words. And then once I lyricized it, then the rest of the band would come in and help fill in the spots. Now, sometimes there would be an inspiration that would hit. One of the songs that I remember this happening for is a song that we titled Rain in Heaven. And originally, we were recording it as something along the lines of a Celtic song. I know how to play Irish tin flute, so I used that for an opening, and then we recorded me singing first, and then we recorded the tin flute track to to kind of help overlay with it. And then halfway through the song, it switched from being Celtic to going into more of a country music feel. So it was a one of those hybrid types. And it kind of interplayed, started off Celtic, went in through the country door, and then at the very end switched back to being Celtic. And it was a really unique song because that it's one of the very few songs I've ever worked on where something like that happened. And we actually got a very surprising reaction from people who heard that. So, I mean, it was one of those examples of kind of a good fortune happening out of nowhere. So,
So, one of the questions I also like to ask musicians on this podcast is if you're looking at your venues that you play
mhm.
at, what would you say would be one thing that you wish a venue could provide you that would make your performance better for the venue?
Number one complaint that I have had and that I've heard so many bands complain about is that if a place has a stage, the electrical systems usually are not set up ideally to where you're having to run extension cords and what have you. Venue owners, please, if you're going to set up a stage, make sure there are enough outlets for everybody to plug into so that we're not having to trip over cords. And please make your stages big enough so we don't feel like we're sitting in each other's laps. I've played on some stages and then some areas where it's so small. I mean, I'm afraid to step forward because if somebody cuts one on stage, all of us are going to know it. They may not hear it in the crowd, they may not hear it on the microphones, but somebody's going to be looking over and it usually cuz there've been a few times where that's happened and my guitar player will look over at me like, "I know you did that." And it's like, "Not guilty, Gerard." But But yeah, I would say that would be the number one thing. If you are a venue owner and you're looking at getting bands in, make sure your performance area is set up to where everything can be put in together to where it's easy. So that we're not having to worry about, are we gonna have to run, five extension cords just to be able to plug in a keyboard and a wireless mic system. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give. The rest of it you can kind of work around. And as a side note to that, if you're gonna put in plugins, don't put 50 plugins in way the hell up here where you have to get a 12-foot ladder in order to plug anything in. The last place that we played, which was over in the Tower District here in Fresno, we're put in this back area where they had decided to put the bands because they reopened after being closed for several months. The only problem is their plug-in area, their electrical area Couple of the plug-in areas were down toward the floor, which is okay as long as you don't have lumbago. But then the other ones that we were using, were like 10 feet up, and we're trying to figure out how the hell we going to get up there to do it. They had to go get the manager who had to haul out a ladder. Okay, you can do it this way. And it's like, well, thanks. So, yeah, electrical situation. Please get it situated.
A- And I appreciate that, right? Because like if you understand sound dynamics,
Hmm.
the closer you have the band to each other, the worse the sound is. So if you want as a venue your sound to be good, you want to give musicians enough space so that they can space out their amps, space out their speakers so they
Yes,
can make sure those sound dynamics are in order.
exactly. And
One thing I'm curious.
there's an, e- there's a, and there is a difference in sound between an indoor venue versus an outdoor venue. Outdoor venues, you generally have more leeway, but the one drawback is because it's outside, you don't have anything to send the sound back to you. There are no acoustics. So if you have monitors and stuff, then you're okay. But otherwise, you gotta this is why it's important to check in with your audience in the first set, the first couple of songs, so that you get an idea. Can you guys hear us out there? Do we need to turn up? Do we need to turn down? You know, that kind of thing. So yes, exactly.
And I like that you said, do we have to turn it down? Because one of the things that I try to impress upon newer musicians is how important volume is when performing. How
Hmm.
much attention do you play to volume when you're doing a live show?
We always pay attention to the volume levels because there are a number of things that can come up that people in the audience don't necessarily realize. One particular experience, I've been breaking in my new full 88 weighted keys keyboard as of this year to start using. And I have two different, um, I guess you would call them channels for two different voices, because some of the songs that we perform, I have to have two different things for. The first channel will come out just fine. In fact, sometimes I have to turn it down. But then if I go to switch to the second channel and the PA isn't set up quite right, I have to turn that side up. And if I'm having to flip between the two channels, it gets tricky. So we want to make sure that we're not blaring out anybody in the audience, but we also want to make sure that all of us can still hear at the end of the night. Particularly my guitar player. And he's the one that we end up having to tell because he's like, can we get more volume on me? And I'm like, dude, they can hear you in Boston. Yeah, but I'm from Brooklyn. I need him to hear me in Brooklyn. I think you'll be okay with that, that kind of thing. So, there have been one or two times where we've had to tell our bass player to turn down. We tried to tell our drummer to turn down, and he's like, "What are you kidding? I can't. I don't have that volume button is broken on my drum set, and it's an acoustic drum set." So, just another example
Uh,
of that in band banter. But yes, volume is very important. We don't want anybody at the end of the night to walk out of there going, "What?" Because we know there's going to be some fights between couples on the way home for that. And we don't want to be responsible for it. We want everybody to have a good time. We want the venue owners to want us back. And you're not going to do that if you're playing at 500,000 decibels thinking that you are the Who at Wembley Stadium. That doesn't work. It might be okay if you're going for the Guinness Book of World Records, but not on an average gig. And the cool thing about it is that
uh,
each member of my current band, we all have a bare minimum of 40 years experience underneath us. So, I mean, we've been around the block a few times. Uh, some of us have gray hair. Some of us are starting to have no hair. Some of us reached no hair 15 years ago, but the point is we pay attention. And because of that, we've actually had people in the audience leave reviews about These guys know their sound levels, they know their gear. So for people to say stuff like that, that tells us that, again, we're headed in the right direction because we're not trying to turn anybody deaf. Now, whether they choose to act like they're deaf, that's on them. So,
So in terms of the live performance, because one of the things that I stress on this podcast is how important it is to support your local acts as
yeah.
compared to some of the larger acts. And one of the things I stress upon people too is once you reach a certain size in a venue,
Mhm.
you have to sacrifice sound quality for
Mm,
uh, loudness depending on the arena, right? So like in the Tacoma
yes.
Dome, for example, like,
Yeah,
there's just no way to make that sound perfect.
correct. And a lo again, it depends on if it's indoor or outdoor, because whenever outdoor arenas happen, even if it's something like an Acropolis or, some sort of a sports stadium, yeah, there is going to be some concession that is made as to volume and sound quality, but this is where it pays to have a good sound tech. If you have somebody in the band or that works with the band, they become a crucial piece of the band because you can have the best sound in the world, but if your levels are off, and even if you have somebody that goes out into the audience and you say, "Hey, play something so I can hear you." If you have somebody that their hearing is slightly off, then you end up, running into some problems. But the sound tech is the guy that you want to give the respect to because you piss him off, he can make you sound like absolute crap. He could make whoever your music idol is sound like a bad recording on a Fisher Price album that we had when we were 3 years old. A lot of the younger musicians wouldn't remember that now, but guys our age, yeah, we know what that is. So, but yeah,
Oh, I do.
you if you have to make a sacrifice, try to go for quality over volume because that if you listen to any of the best, live albums from any group that you happen to be a fan of. The best live albums, you can hear what the singers are singing, and you can hear the different instruments, and they're not always blaring you out because the louder you go or the harder somebody tries to sing, that actually causes some singers to go flat. And that's why it sometimes you'll hear them and it'll be like, "Wait a minute, that wasn't quite right." If in in tune, and I've seen it happen, so always look for the quality of the sound over the loudness of the sound. Your audiences will thank you for it.
And one of the things that I like to stress upon this podcast too is how important it is for fans to let you know as an artist that they enjoy your music, because we can be such hard critics upon ourselves, right? We are so hard on ourselves.
That
And
is
so
very
please, from an artist's perspective, can you tell your listeners and people who enjoy your music how important it is for feedback?
it it still is the number one way to let any musician know how they're doing because you can tell other people, "Yeah, go see these guys because they sound great. I love their music. They get you involved." All that is well and good for a word of mouth campaign. But it's important to let the artists themselves know what's going on in your mind because that way you can tell us, "Hey, I really liked this song. Um, can you do more of that?" Or "I wasn't as crazy about this particular tune over here." And then that gives us a chance to ask you for feedback. And you also, as an artist, have to understand, and as fans also have to understand, you're not going to please everybody all the time. There's always going to be that one person that's out there. Well, I just don't like you because you don't sound like the Beatles. You don't sound like Led Zeppelin, so you suck. And I'm sorry, I've had people tell me that because I'm one of those
Ah,
guys that I don't I don't do what everybody else does. I don't play the cheap heat. And if you get offended by that term, well, that's on you. Um, in fact, fans have come up, people in the audience have come up to me during, or other band members, as a matter of fact, in between sets or after a show. And they have told us things like, some of these songs that you guys are doing, we haven't heard in 20, 30 years. If it's an original thing, people will come up, how did you come up with the idea for this song? It's something that really resonated with me. Either way, people have come up and have told me, whether it's been me as a solo artist or when I'm in a cover band or when I'm in an original band. People have had no problems letting me know what works and what they'd like to see improved. And of course, you get those one or two hecklers out there that just insist on pissing on everything because either they got offended that they weren't able to make it in the music business as a teenager, or some girl dumped them for a guitar player, which I have to say I was a victim on that one in my teenage years. But it's let us know how we're doing. If there's something that you really liked, let us know. If there's something you didn't like, let us know. If you are in a cover band like I am currently, if there is somebody you would like to see us do, let us know. In fact, my current band, Skeleton Crew, we have been at different venues and people have asked us, hey, do you do, for as an example, one venue we got, hey, do you guys do any AC/DC? Not at that time, but a month later, we had an AC/DC song ready. And uh, we didn't, it's not You Shook Me All Night Long. It's not Highway to Hell, because that's what everybody does. We chose It's a Long Way to the Top. And if you're wondering how I can do that without being able to play bagpipes, which I'm trying to learn, by the way, that's why having a good keyboard really helps. We actually did that song at a benefit performance in January for a young man who has a very rare disease. And that was the song we opened up with. We had dancers out there that the second they heard the bagpipe squealing on my keyboard, we saw faces light up. Like, I mean, you would have thought that Metallica had just walked on stage. And I have perfected the technique of sounding the inflation and the deflation at the end of the song, which people, even seasoned musicians that were coming up to me that have had problems with me in the past, they're like, I don't know how you figured that out, but that was freaking awesome. So we've had probably 10 songs, at least in our current song roster, that are there because people asked us, can you can you guys do a song by so and so? We actually take that seriously. And we love hearing what people want to hear. Now, if they're asking us to do a particular song and it's something that everybody else does, it may not make it into the roster because that's not the band vision at this point. Because I'm going to explain something that I don't know that a lot of people really realize out there. You can take any 10 cover bands and you can look at all 10 of their song rosters together. I guarantee you that close to 50 to 65% are going to be all the same songs by the same artists. And then you can go into any area where multiple bands are playing on the same night. I'll bet you at least once, at least 2 to 3 bands are going to play at least 2 to 3 of the same songs. That is an old formula that used to work, and venue owners could learn a lesson here too. I used to go see other bands, and supporting local bands is just as important as the ones that made it. I promise you. And even the guys that are trying to start out, they're just as important as supporting somebody that's been around for a while. I'm going to explain a couple of things here. One, you go to any concert that's going on. And it's local stuff. It's not even with the big people, because with big people, you know what to expect. But on the local levels, you go see a band, and if they're a cover band, you're going to hear people saying, "Oh my God, I heard that." How many times can you hear Brown Sugar by Rolling Stones? How many times can you hear Stairway to Heaven or anything Led Zeppelin, really? How many times can you hear frickin' Bon Jovi? I heard that last week by another band and they did it so much better. And while there's competition, there's something to be said for friendly competition. That indicates that people don't want to hear that. But a lot of artists and a lot of venue owners, well, that's what gets us drinks. That's what gets people in. What's to stop a venue owner from saying, "Why the hell am I paying a band to play the same old stuff all the time? We can just put in a jukebox. We can hire a DJ, have them flip it, and we pay them less money." That will kill the music scene. Another thing about it, when it comes to supporting your local acts, if you have a band that's seriously trying to get out there, maybe they're a newer band, they're just starting out, or, within the first 5 years. Some areas, including the Fresno Clovis area, you will get a particular clique of musicians that maybe they've been around a while. They don't want to let go of that fan base because they were here first. And, some of them are in like half a dozen to a dozen bands. All they have to do is switch one member out and they repackage it and it's another band. And they don't want to give up. It's like holding an iron fist. The only problem is, and that used to be an effective model before COVID hit. Because when the pandemic hit, I mean, that killed so much social scene. People don't even realize, particularly if you're an extrovert, but that's for another time. So when the music scene started coming back, they tried to go back to this iron-fisted cockroach mentality. And that's exactly what it is, because if you can't do something in one or two bands on your own, well, maybe if I get in a dozen bands, I can suck up all the gigs that aren't nailed down, and then everybody has to come and see me because there's nobody else I'll allow to play unless they kiss my ass. And I'm sorry, but that happens here. Where I'm at, the Central Valley, that happens here. And anybody who is catching this particular podcast, yes, I said it. Yes, you know who I am. No, I really don't care what you think, because I'm talking truth here and truth hurts. I have some friends that are younger musicians that were starting out. And because of this kind of mentality, there were a couple of them that were really talented that quit. They gave up. And that is one of the biggest travesties of them all, because it 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 is so damaging to see somebody give up on a dream, or somebody give up on pursuing a goal because somebody else said, "I was here first. I'm not going to let you do it. And if you try, I'm going to step on you." Whether this is somebody who has great raw talent that is just getting started, or somebody who is kind of like me, who's been around a while, who has oodles of experience, but you get the egos going. "Well, why should I let you play in here? You don't kiss my ass. You don't do the same kind of music I do. So why should I let you be with the cool kids?" And I had a problem with that for a long time. I almost gave up on music for a long time. That happened twice. And the first time, it was because of certain things in my personal life, which I will not go into at this point, but it didn't last very long, because I found out music is the biggest non-human part of my personality, and it felt like I was trying to restrain a part of myself. The second time that it happened, I came to the realization that I'm 50 years old and I've been involved in music for 47 of those years. I literally grew up in the industry. I am too stubborn and too damn stupid to know what else to do. I am an entertainer. I've been involved with music. That's my strongest suit, but it's not the only thing I've done. I have also been a public speaker. I have been involved in sports entertainment, which is pro wrestling for those who don't know what that means. I've done it on local levels. I started off as a manager. I've been a referee. I've been a sports announcer. I've been a ring announcer, and I've even been used in a few squash matches here and there. Last year, at the age of 50, I logged my first film credit, which means I got cast in my first movie. I have another one that's going to be coming up next month that I've been cast for by the same director. If anybody had come to me on any of those counts and managed to persuade me from keeping trying, because some dreams, especially if it's a strong thing within you, becomes a lifelong passion. It's not a hobby. If you play a couple of gigs and you get paid here and there, the second that you gross $1, it is no longer a hobby. And if it's something that you love, I'm going to say something I normally don't say here. Screw what anybody else thinks. Now, by the same token, some people get dissuaded because they simply cannot do what, I mean, it's one thing to have the passion, but you also have to have the set of skills. And some people, you can develop them, but in some areas,
Ah, we
there's
lost you.
that intangible quality that either you have it or you
It
don't.
happens, folks.
If you simply do not have it,
We'll give it a couple minutes while he plugs in
just
his
because you don't
phone.
have it in one area, that doesn't mean that you don't have it anywhere. I've known some people who wanted to be actors, musicians, dancers,
I don't know if this will make
or
it in
other
or not. A
things.
couple of things that I want to
And for
call
some
out
reason,
from
it
that
simply
last
just didn't
conversation that
get,
I really
it
appreciate
just
is the
didn't
not
happen.
giving up
Something
piece, right?
happened
Because
where
things like this
timing was
happen.
never right. There was something they
Technology
could never
is
quite get.
technology, and remote
And then they realized it
podcasting
within
is remote
themselves.
podcasting. It happens
And they had to give
all
up
the time.
that aspect of their dream.
But like he was saying, you
The
got to
simple
keep
thing to
at it,
do is don't give
and you
up
got to
on
keep
it
doing it,
altogether. See if there's
because
another area
if it's
where you
something you're
might
passionate about, and
be
these
more
interviews I'm
suited.
really passionate about,
If you
I'm not
want
going
to
to
learn
stop.
an instrument, but you find
Can't
that you don't
stop.
have the hand dexterity for guitar or piano, try learning the bass. Try learning a different instrument. Perhaps you're a drummer. Perhaps you know how to play a brass instrument. Maybe you're a saxophone player. Maybe you can learn something like harmonica. If you just don't have the gift for an instrument, but you know how to hear very well, and maybe you can't sing that good, try going into being a DJ. Try going into being a sound tech or a recording studio worker. Maybe you can be a session player. There are so many avenues out there in 2026 that you can follow. If you don't have a gift for music, maybe there's another part of the performing arts you can get into. If you've got a good voice, maybe you can get into voiceover acting. Maybe you can go into stage acting. Maybe you can find another outlet to put your particular passion with what skills you have into focus and into practice. Find a way to make it work for you. So many people, from aspiring children all the way up to people who have been in businesses that have had that measure of fame, that maybe they went through something where they lost part of that gift or all of it. We all face challenges. We all have particular gifts we're given, but it's up to us to find out what they are. And if you are in a position to encourage someone, please don't turn out to be the guy that they talk about 15, 20 years from now, yeah, that guy was an asshole and he made me feel like I couldn't do anything. And so I gave up and just now I'm stuck at 50 years old and I'm working at Burger King. Been here for 20 years because I can't do nothing else. Opinions and influence, depending on which you get, can either make or break somebody's dream. They say sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can either break your heart or they can slingshot you to the stars. So choose your words wisely. And if you are a recipient of words, check to see how they're being given because sometimes we can interpret things incorrectly. That's why it's so important to hear people rather than just look at words on the internet. So, by all means, make sure that you know what's going on and try to try to keep your influence going because you never know whose life you're going to touch.
Host. And welcome back, everybody. On a little technical issue, such as the life of podcasting. You had talked about the importance of understanding, and let me circle back to that. You were sort of touching base on the necessity to support musicians along the way. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I think is awesome about the Portland music scene, especially in the blues scene, is they're starting to have all of these different jams now where they're
Mhm.
inviting the younger folks to participate. So how important is supporting the youth when it comes to music?
Just like anything else, the youth is the future of the business. It is the future of music itself. And music is one of the very few universal languages that we have. So I hope this doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, but sooner or later, everybody dies. And the generations that came before us, I think, knew the importance of having a role model or a template. We have to keep that template going because if we don't, it'll become extinct at some point. And with more technological advances, particularly now we're delving into AI territory, you have to be careful because the next generation is going to say, well, I don't have to sit down and write anything. I can just plug it into an app and I can tell it to come up with music about, tickling feathers in certain body parts and it'll generate it for me. And then I can claim to be a star. No, you want to support the next generation coming. You want to be the one to teach them how to do it because you don't want the live aspect. You don't want people to start becoming what was once described in the book The Time Traveler as dull eyed, fragile limbed, and baby brained. You don't want to make it so that people so that people lose those skills because it's not just important to music, but it's important to life in general. If we don't support each other and if we don't teach the ones that are coming behind us how to do what we do, who knows what's going to happen? I would hate to know that any grandchildren I may have or great grandchildren may possibly live in a society where people don't know how to make music because it wasn't taught to them, because it was lost. I think that will be a truly tragic day for humankind when that happens.
Yeah, especially when you consider just how much work is involved, right? So being a musician is a hard thing. It's one
Oh
of
yeah.
those things where you put in the work and the outcome is going to be amazing, yet it still does take all of those hours just to be able to be
Exactly.
stage ready.
And that's
And
and it's not just learning the music either. It's actually learning it enough to tighten up the wickets where you need it. It's making sure that everybody else in the group is on point, right tempo, right speed, no ramps involved. Sorry, Mark, if you hear this. Um, and even just figuring out what kind of music you want to do. One thing I encourage younger musicians, don't stick to the tried and true stuff because that formula is getting old. It's like a shirt that you have that you wear, it's favorite shirt, favorite pair of pants, whatever. Eventually, they're gonna become threadbare. "But I like it." Okay, well, are you happy if you have a 2-foot hole gaping in your stomach or a 2-foot hole gaping so that people can see if you're wearing underwear or not? Is that really what you want people to know you for? Find something a little different. Find something similar to what you like to hear, but maybe 15 degrees to the side. Look in some of the areas that aren't as listened to. Get away from the radio, get away from the albums. Look at the stuff that's not as covered. You'd be surprised what you find, and you may even like what you find. You may like it well enough that, like me, you want to share it with other people, but on a larger scale. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not about the money. It's not about getting glory or fame or whatever it is most rock and rollers want to get. For me, it's about sharing things with the world, sharing my gifts, the gifts of my bandmates, and sharing the music that is out there that deserves more love. And for the naysayers out there, because there's quite a few of them, you can stick with what you want to stick with. And that's fine. Everybody has a comfort zone. But if you're too chicken to step outside of it, or you're too close minded to step outside of it, you're never going to know if you're going to like anything else or not. Sorry, but there it is.
and I also like, so I my music origin story is a little interesting because like what I also want to press upon people is like, even if you don't like it the first time, give it a listen to
Uh-huh.
5 more times and see if you can figure it out, right? Because when I first listened to Metallica Black, I hated that album. I absolutely hated it because I didn't get it. And it wasn't until
Okay.
the 5th time that I forced myself to listen to that I figured out, "Oh, I'm supposed to feel this way. I'm supposed to have this sort of reaction." And from then on, I loved Metallica. But if I would have just given up on that genre of music because the first time I heard it, I didn't understand it,
Gotcha.
a whole genre of music would be missing for me. So I always recommend to people like, give a band 5 chances before you give up on them, because
Yeah,
you never know if you when you're going to get it or if you're going to get it.
exactly. I know when I first heard Metallica, it was in high school and it wasn't my thing. Um, I, s- when I was in between bands and stuff, at one point I got big onto the karaoke circuit and I would hear Enter Sandman and Master of Puppets. If I never hear either of those two songs again, no offense, I'll be happy. But I tried singing Enter Sandman at karaoke one time. My ex told me, "You're never allowed to sing heavy metal or Metallica ever again."
Oh no.
I moved to Fresno, and I get involved with a band that was big down here for a long time called Steelgrave. They have me learn the Four Horsemen, and actually, when we would do that live, that always got a big pop from the audience. My ex is finally at one of these shows. I think it was at the album release party, the only album that band ever recorded before they disbanded. But we did at that show, we did Four Horsemen. She actually had the nerve to get mad at me after the show, and I'm like, "What?" She said, "I told people you can't sing Metallica. Why'd you have to go and prove me wrong?" That's the first time I've ever had somebody get mad at me for proving them wrong in a positive way. So Yeah, I agree. I'm still not that big of a Metallica fan, but there are certain songs that I can get down with. Four Horsemen is one of them. It will always hold a special place for me. Um,
A-
yeah,
And must I
so
say, I'm sorry you had to go through that gaslighting. And folks, if you're listening and you want to know all about gaslighting, please check out my podcast, Sullivan's Unheard Voices, where we talk about domestic violence with Mandy. Because instead of being supportive of you, man, instead of saying, "Hey, way to go, good job," the first thing is it's all about her. I'm so sorry. That's rough. But I want to
yeah,
stick back to
that's
music.
another story for another
Yeah.
topic for another time.
And we've been at this for about an hour now. So the last question I would like to ask is,
Yeah,
if you were looking back at the youth coming up, what would you say to them to keep them encouraged in a landscape where it's really competitive?
I'll give you three parting shots, three pieces of advice. Piece number one: go with what the audience tells you, not with what other musicians tell you, not with what the venue owners tell you. Go with your audience. Your audience is going to be your ultimate determination of whether you come back or not. If they give you words of encouragement, keep going. If they give you places where you can improve, look at it and see if they're right, because 9 out of 10 times they are. Piece number two: if you are passionate enough about it and you feel like you could make it, go for it. If you feel like you've got gifts, but something is holding you back, one of my conditions I have to deal with, I'm a disabled citizen. I was born with a severe birth defect, and eventually I ended up losing part of one of my legs. I didn't let it stop me. I don't perform from a wheelchair unless I have to. I have a prosthetic leg. I'm a peg leg rocker. I get out and I do my thing. And that's one thing that a lot of people, I like to tell people, I mean, does that hurt or anything? I just tell them I'm getting a leg up on the competition. So don't, the only person that can truly stop or limit what you do is you. Don't kill your own dream. Chase it until you can't chase it anymore. And when you're down on the ground, if you have to crawl baby steps, do it. The last piece of advice I'm going to give you: William Shakespeare said it best when he said, "This above all, to thine own self be true." That was a profound piece of advice coming from somebody in the what was it, the Elizabethan era, who was actually a dirty old man who knew how to speak. One of the few pieces of advice that rings true today as it did back then. Stay true to yourself. Don't try to conform to other people's molds just to be accepted. If you want it, go after it on your own terms. And if you're determined enough, you're going to find a way to do it. I promise you. You take those three pieces to heart, the rest of it tends to fall in line. And if I have to add a slight fourth, don't do it for the money. There's not a lot of money that's involved in it unless you hit those top tiers. Do it because it's what you love to do. And that's true with any job in life. There
And
you
Wayne, I
there you
can't
go.
think of another way to end this podcast. I can't think of any that well said. But I will end the podcast the way I always end the podcast, folks. Be kind. We all live on the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world would just be a little bit of better if we treated everybody with a little dignity and respect. Wayne, thank you so
I'll
much.
remember that. Thank you.